7 minutes in, the ball is already in Paraguay's net, and the American bench is on its feet. By halftime, Folarin Balogun has scored twice, and SoFi Stadium sounds like it might lift off the ground. 4 goals in one game, the most the United States has ever scored in a World Cup match. What almost nobody in that stadium realized was this. The last time this team put up numbers like that, the year was 1930, and the opponent was the exact same country. Now, to understand why this result hit the way it did, you have to remember where this team was just 10 weeks earlier. Nobody was backing the United States in March. They had just lost 5-2 to Belgium and gotten shut out at home by Portugal. The fans were restless. The talk shows were calling for changes. Some people wanted the manager gone before a single ball had been kicked at his home World Cup. This was a side carrying real doubt into the biggest tournament of their lives. And then they walked out in front of a packed crowd in Inglewood and turned all of it upside down. To be fair, the signs of life were there if you looked closely enough. In the weeks right before the tournament, the United States edged Senegal 3-2 and pushed a strong Germany side all the way before losing by a single goal. And late last year, they had hammered Uruguay 5-1 and defeated this same Paraguay team 2-1 in a friendly. The talent was never really the question. Whether all of it would finally show up on the biggest night was, from the first whistle, the United States came out pressing. Christian Pulisic and Weston McKennie hunted the ball high up the pitch, and Paraguay looked rattled before they could settle into any kind of rhythm. The plan from Mauricio Pochettino was clear. Squeeze them, give them no time on the ball, and make the early minutes uncomfortable. In the 7th minute, that pressure paid off. Pulisic drove straight at the defense. The ball pinged around the Paraguay box, and defender Damian Bobadilla turned it into his own net trying to clear it. 7 minutes in, and the host nation already had the start they had been dreaming about. And that wasn't even the part that got people out of their seats, because then Folarin Balogun decided to make this his night. The Monaco striker had spent months hearing that he wasn't clinical enough for the big stage, that he went missing in the games that mattered. In the 31st minute, Pulisic slipped him a pass inside the box, and Balogun took it first time, side-footing it past the keeper before the defense could react. 2-0. The forward, who was supposed to freeze under the lights, had just opened his World Cup account in front of his home crowd, and you could see the weight come off his shoulders the second it went in. What he did right before halftime was even better. Deep into first half stoppage time, Balogun picked the ball up near the edge of the box, took one touch to set himself, and curled it into the top corner. 3-0. The whole bench erupted. 2 goals in a single half from the man everyone had doubted. That second goal would end up meaning far more than just padding the scoreline. But that's getting ahead of the story. There was one nervy moment before the break. Pulisic had taken a heavy kick to the leg, and at halftime the staff pulled him off as a precaution rather than risk him in the opening game of a long tournament. On came Sebastian Berhalter, and that substitution carried its own little piece of history. His father, Greg Berhalter, had played for the United States at a World Cup years before, which made the two of them only the second father and son to both appear for the national team on this stage. And no, I'm not making that up. Out at the back, 38-year-old Tim Ream wore the captain's armband, and by simply stepping onto the pitch, he became the oldest player ever to represent the United States at a World Cup. A veteran defender holding the line behind a young, hungry attack. It told you everything about how Pochettino built this squad. 13 players returning from the last tournament, 13 others tasting a World Cup for the very first time. Paraguay, though, did not come to roll over. They are a proud, well-drilled side under Argentine coach Gustavo Alfaro, a man they call the Professor, and they were back at a World Cup for the first time since 2010, the year they reached the quarterfinals. Do not let the scoreline fool you about their quality. On the road to this tournament, they beat both Argentina and Brazil during qualifying. They came into this World Cup ranked around 41st in the world, the lowest ranked side in the group. But anyone who watched them grind through South American qualifying knew that ranking did not tell the whole story. So when substitute Mauricio pulled one back in the 73rd minute to make it 3-1, the mood inside the stadium shifted in an instant. The crowd went quiet. The old doubt crept back in. Could the United States hold on, or were the familiar nervy habits about to return? And then this team made the one decision that changed the whole feel of the night. They kept attacking. Instead of sitting deep and protecting the lead the way so many American sides have done before, the United States pushed for a fourth. Deep into second half stoppage time, Giovanni Reyna collected the ball near the edge of the area and finished with the outside of his boot, bending it past the keeper for 4-1. It was the kind of goal you score when you are playing with belief instead of fear. And Reina, a player who had spent years fighting injuries and watching from the bench, was the one who sealed the biggest scoreline of his country's modern World Cup history. For years, the knock on American teams was that they would protect a lead and sit back and invite pressure onto themselves. This team did the opposite. They sensed a wobble, and instead of shrinking, they went looking for a fourth. By the final whistle, Pulisic had a hand in 3 of the 4 goals, and alongside Balogun, he was the standout man on the pitch. The nerves from March felt like they belonged to a completely different team. If you are enjoying this breakdown, take a second to subscribe. This channel covers the 2026 World Cup all the way through, every match that matters, and every story worth telling. So, 4 goals, a home crowd in full voice, a brace from the striker nobody trusted. All of that was special on its own. But what put this result into the record books made it look almost small by comparison. Here is the number that matters. 4 goals is the most the United States men's team has ever scored in a single World Cup match. Not in 2022, not in 2002, not even in 1950. You have to go all the way back to the very first World Cup in 1930 to find an American team that scored like this. That's not a typo, by the way, 96 years. And the coincidence runs even deeper. At that 1930 World Cup, a forward named Bert Patenaude scored a hat-trick against Paraguay. Years later, FIFA officially recognized it as the very first hat-trick in World Cup history. The opponent on that day, all those decades ago, was Paraguay. The opponent on this night, 96 years later, was Paraguay again. Same country, same story, almost a century apart. 4 goals on the board. The biggest World Cup win this country has put together since that very first tournament back in 1930. For a team that had spent the spring being written off, that is a statement, and it came on the grandest stage they will ever play on, in front of their own people. There's a reason that 1930 team is still talked about today. That side finished 3rd at the inaugural World Cup, beating Belgium and then Paraguay before losing in the semifinals. It remains the best the United States has ever finished at a World Cup, full stop. After that came decades of near misses and false starts. There was the famous 1950 win over England, 1-0, still ranked among the greatest upsets the sport has ever seen. There was the spirited run to the quarterfinals in 2002. But in each of the last 3 World Cups, in 2010, 2014, and 2022, the United States reached the round of 16 and then went home. The ceiling always seemed to sit in exactly the same place. Which brings us to the man standing on the touchline. Mauricio Pochettino took this job back in September of 2024. The Argentine had managed Tottenham, Paris Saint-Germain, and Chelsea at the highest levels of European football, and he arrived as the highest paid coach in the history of United States soccer, earning around $6 million a year. For a manager with that kind of resume, this was still his first ever World Cup as a head coach. Plenty of people questioned whether a European club manager could make an international side click in the time he had, and after those ugly March friendlies, the questions only got louder. Taking a team that had been written off and turning them into the side that scored 4 in their World Cup opener? Looking back on it now, hiring him was either a stroke of genius or a wildly expensive gamble. On this night, it looked a lot like genius. Everything is now in place for a serious run, but the United States has not actually won anything yet. This was one game in a long tournament. Group D still has to play out. Next up are Australia on June 19th and Turkey on June 25th, and in the new expanded 48-team format, finishing top of the group sets up a far kinder route through the knockout rounds. Slip to 2nd or 3rd, and the bracket can throw one of the tournament favorites at them almost straight away. Win those games the way they took apart Paraguay, and the conversation stops being about escaping the round of 16. It starts being about how far this team can genuinely go. And the timing of all of this? On home soil, in front of their own fans, in the opening match, almost too perfect. Think back to that 7th minute, the ball hitting the Paraguay net, the bench leaping up, a home crowd that had spent months bracing for disappointment, suddenly daring to believe. By the end of the night, that belief had turned into 4 goals, a brace from Balogun, a stoppage time strike from Reina, and a record that had sat untouched since 1930. And somehow, given where this team was just 10 weeks earlier, it got even sweeter. The United States did not just win their World Cup opener, they reminded an entire country what this team can look like when it plays without fear. The tournament is far from over, but for one night in Los Angeles, the ceiling finally cracked. If you want the full ride through this World Cup, stick around. The next chapter is only days away.